Welcome to the Dearly Discarded podcast. My name is Jared St. Clair, and it is so good to have you joining us here today. The story we are about to tell is a compelling one. It involves a sweet little 8-year-old. Her name is Ryleigh, and we're going to talk with her mother about the journey they've been on since the beginning of January of 2022, having to do with vaccine injury. I've got Jennifer Jones on the podcast with me today. Jennifer, welcome to the Dearly Discarded podcast.
Hi, Jared. Thank you for having me on today.
Really happy to have you. Thank you for joining me. I know that our lives are all busy, and so everybody that's listening, we sure appreciate having you, and certainly being the mother of an injured child must have really turned your world upside down. Tell us a little bit about you and Ryleigh so that we can get this started.
My name is Jennifer. I am a mom of two. I have a 7-year-old as well, and we live out in Dinwiddie County, Virginia, which is south of Richmond. We actually live on a farm, and we lived a normal country style life. Ryleigh is my 8-year-old daughter, who was vaccine injured this year. Our plan this year was to start out with getting braces. Sorry, my brain is fried. Getting braces. Well, our plans kind of took a really big plunge in February when our daughter woke up a different person. And so brought us down the road of figuring out what was wrong with her. We didn't realize at the time that we didn't put all this together at the time. But we've had an extensive hospital visit process over the last 3 or 4 months since February 15th. It ended April 21st. And Ryleigh, during that process, it started with a psychosis episode and blackouts and fainting. It progressed on further to her losing ability to feel her limbs. She had ringing in her ears. Her fingers were tingly. Her veins, she would feel tingling in them. There were lots of things that happened to Ryleigh. For the first 3 weeks, you couldn't touch her. She went into a psych unit. She's had numerous tests, which have all come back clear. She lost her ability to walk on March the 23rd. And then on April the 5th, she lost her ability to sensation of urine. And she slowly started to stabilize, thank God. And she is actually starting to recover now.
So her initial injection was January 6th, I believe you said, and that was one Pfizer shot, not both, that she ended up having, right?
Yes, thank the Lord.
And you initially, when you were seeing these symptoms, especially the psychosis, I have to imagine as a mother, that was a pretty difficult thing to manage. What were your thoughts in terms of what might be going on? What type of information were you getting from hospitals or doctors? What were they saying?
Yeah, so we went down the road of psychosis and being like a trauma and things like that. So we went and combed our lives, and we went to school and requested a meeting with principals and tried to see if there was anything going on at school that we didn't know about. They put her in the psych unit, and she had to come up, she came up with traumas. They actually called CPS on me because her dad drove too fast in a car. And apparently her 6-year-old sister is killing her, which she was 6 at the time. And apparently I popped her in her mouth a couple of years ago. So those were her traumas, because they were thinking she had a dysregulated mood disorder. So that was the first thing. And then when we got her home, they kept her for 3 weeks. When we got her home, the same thing happened again. Took her right back. They took her again for a few days. This time they said, well, maybe it's operational defiance disorder or ODD. Mm-hmm. My child has never been defiant, not ever. She's been very, very sweet and teacher's pet, all-star, like just loved life, loved her friends, loved dance, the whole, like loved vacation, just loved everything. It's just totally not something that I would say for Ryleigh. Then we go on and we get more diagnoses. Well, more opinions. How about that? We won't say
Right.
diagnoses. We'll say opinions, because when we went up to Johns Hopkins, they also, they were the first ones to tell me functional neurological disorder. VCU never told me that. Johns Hopkins says it's written all over her chart. And I said, well, I didn't know that because they never told me that it was FND. They were trying to figure out a diagnosis. They were still trying, even though the FND is an actual real diagnosis. And I said, no, I don't believe it's FND either. I just don't believe it because of all the other tests that she's having, plus the symptoms are progressing. And it just didn't make sense to me, because she had inflammation, she had a positive ANA, she had white blood cells in her urine, red blood cell counts were high, a lot of her vitamin levels were out of whack. The platelet count was low. Like there was a lot of things. The cellular size was off. There was a lot of things that were off. I didn't know that at the time. I know that now.
Right. So then as you progress through these various, you went to, I believe, 4 different hospitals, then you ended up at VCU and then Johns Hopkins. When did you start to wonder or start to believe that maybe the vaccine had something to do with this?
Once I got the FND diagnosis is when I really started researching and like, what is FND, first of all, because I hadn't heard it. Like everything they're telling me, I'm researching, so I'm backtracking them. Like when they told me she had dysregulated mood, I looked it up. Well, before they can diagnose you with that, you have to have a dysregulated mood for 12 months. She doesn't have a 12, so they can't have that.
Right.
ODD is not common for anyone under 12. So like I kept going back, trying to back into, because it just didn't make sense. When you know something's wrong with your child, you just know. I can't explain how I know that something, I just know my child was different and that something went terribly wrong. And it was right after anesthesia. So I feel like something within all of that, it just hit her immune system. She's had pneumonia twice since then. And she, like I said, the positive ANA and all that stuff, and she was just really she had brain fog. She had memory loss. She couldn't tell you her name. She couldn't tell you who she was, where she was, why she was there, nothing. She walked like she was drunk when she could walk. It was extremely disturbing, extremely.
So with the FND diagnosis and your dive into the internet to try and figure out what that means, what did you find that made you start connecting dots back to the vaccine?
I found that when I would show people the test results from the different Facebook groups of functional neurological disorder, and I asked actual people that have real diagnosis of FND, I asked them, would you have normal blood results or would they be something wrong? And they said they would normally have all normal blood results, that there wouldn't be. And I would show them some of the test results and they would be like, yep, that's vaccine. That's definitely vaccine. And so I ended up going to New York. I saw a New York doctor and he diagnosed her with SFN, small fiber neuropathy. And that made more sense to me because her sensation, the numbing and tingling and stuff with her back, and having gone from sensation to zero sensation, she had no sensation, none at all from the waist down. And she couldn't hold her weight. She was not weight bearing at all. So she had a wheelchair, she was in a wheelchair for a while. And it was just, there's so much trauma, not drama, trauma. There was so much trauma. I've tried to block some of it out, but pretty much that's kind of what happened. So the doctor in New York recommended IVIG, and and IVIG, well, we've done a lot of things. IVIG is just the latest. We've done a lot of things to get Ryleigh back to normal.
So the IVIG has been a success for her.
Absolutely,
Okay.
100%.
How often does she need to do that?
Once a week.
Okay. And how long has she been doing that?
She just had her fourth infusion, third or fourth. Started on the 18th, and each week after. So I think it was the third.
Yeah.
Third.
But in those 3 weeks, there's been a significant improvement.
Yes, absolutely,
Excellent.
100%.
What else was recommended for you then? And
Um,
what else has
oh
worked?
yes. So in April, after we went to see this New York doctor, we found results of celiac disease. So she tested for, so because of that test, he said she definitely has celiac now,
Hmm.
which we know now that she doesn't. She doesn't have celiac because we did another test that says no, she doesn't have it. So this is the kind of things that I've been doing. This is where it is. Like I've been getting up and down answers this entire time. One person will say something and someone else will say something else. It's been very confusing to me.
I'm sure.
But anyway, the gluten is what stopped the episodes, the blackouts. After I removed gluten, GMO, and organic food from Ryleigh, I mean non-organic from Ryleigh, her episodes stopped immediately within a few days.
That's wonderful.
They were gone.
Okay.
And we know now, you can always look back at things, but we know now that food was playing a huge factor.
Sure.
And it took a while to get that because I also talked to people that had pandas. You asked me how did I come down this road, because
Yeah.
I started out with the pandas because I know that's a controversial diagnosis as well as pandas. And that's how I got into the Facebook train, right? Because I was looking up pandas at first.
Gotcha. And for people that don't know anything about pandas, because I don't think it's common knowledge, tell us a little bit about why you thought it might be that and what that is.
Well, pandas is it starts out as in a psychosis like that, but it usually happens after a strep infection that goes untreated, and that's how you would get pandas.
Okay.
And it would have these similar rage sessions and the psychosis and disassociations and all of that. It would have that, and there are other children that like that. So that's what brought me down the pandas. Of course, she tested negative for the streptococcus, so she never had strep. So that kind of ruled out pandas. But I have also heard that it could have already been in the brain and that it's not going to show on an encephalitis test. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know that we'll ever know what was really.
I want to talk a little bit more about her recovery, because she's, before the video started, she got a little nervous and decided not to join us. But I've been able to, notice that she's up and moving around and looking like pretty much a normal kid at this point, at least from what I can see.
Yes.
Which is fantastic.
Thank
So then the
God.
question would be, what else besides the IVIG that have you had success with? I want to get into that for sure, but I want to ask one other question first before we jump into that. And that would be, when you got the small fiber diagnosis, small fiber neuropathy, that's a very, very common diagnosis. In fact, it might be the most common diagnosis I'm hearing from people I'm interviewing, with these vaccine injuries. You got that, you pieced together that it was a vaccine, the Pfizer one that created all of this. What did you think at that moment? I mean, did you feel like you were all alone? This was like this super rare thing. Did you already know that there were other people that had been vaccine injured? Where were you at in that part of the process?
I was in denial.
Okay.
I just couldn't believe that this is happening to me because I don't feel very rare. Right now, I feel like I've been living in a twilight zone because I just can't believe that this has happened to my child. That I never in a million years would have thought that this happened, this would have happened to us.
And so once you did recognize that it had to do with a vaccine, what led you, because now you're a member of React 19, which is how I got in touch with you. React 19, if you're listening for the first time, right now. React 19 is an organization of about 40,000 members of people who have been injured by one of the COVID shots from all four of the different vaccines that are out there. And every member is either injured or a family member of someone who is injured or killed. And so the question is, you went from denial, this can't be the vaccine, this couldn't be happening to me,
Correct.
to, I guess, at some point, acceptance that that's what was going on. What flipped the trigger there? When was it discovering other vaccine injuries, or what did you find that led you to this point, to React 19?
It was the other people that were vaccine injured that had kept talking to me, and they kept telling me, because I kept saying, no, that's not, it's just not, it's my imagination. Like, this is just not, maybe it's just a psychological problem. And they kept telling me, no, it's not, she's gone. She's had all these other things happen that they've had happen too. And they just kept telling me, like, it's not. And I had people validating me that had also had F&D diagnoses, and they would look at the results, and they would just say, yeah, they're gaslighting you. They're absolutely gaslighting you.
Hmm.
And it took me like forever to believe that.
And then when you did discover that there were so many others that had been injured, what was your reaction at that point?
I cried because it's just sad. I didn't realize that there are so many people out here. And their stories are just like mine. They've been through hospital, and people just tell them it's functional neurological disorder. That's what they're told all the time. They
Yeah,
get the same message.
I've heard that over 80% of the members of React 19 were diagnosed with a mental health problem, anxiety being the primary one
Yeah,
that most have. So at that point, did you report this injury to anyone? Did you fill out a VAERS report or anything like that?
I did. February and in late February, I think.
Okay. Okay, so after you filed the VAERS report, did you hear from Pfizer? Did you hear from the CDC? What came of that?
They did return my call the next day, but they just wanted to know what hospitals had I been to, and they said that they would get back with me.
Was that the
and
CDC?
I've not heard any. That was theirs.
That was VAERS. Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they said they would get back with me, but they never did.
Okay.
I've never received a phone call from anyone.
And have you heard from Pfizer at all?
No.
Okay. All right. So then once, is there anything else? I'll just ask you this way. Is there anything else about the journey in terms of the discovery of what was going on that you'd like to share with those who are listening right now before we move on to the next question?
I think mother's instinct has a lot to say, and that if you see something different in your child, you should speak up and don't give up on your kid, and don't let others make you feel like you are wrong when you know something's wrong, because it's a scary place to be when you don't know what's wrong. And I don't wish this on my worst nightmare.
Yeah, I'm sure. It sounds incredibly challenging, to say the least. Okay, so then let's get back to the hopeful side of this, because it's really exciting. Yeah. One of the things that I'm really excited to talk to you about specifically is the fact that Ryleigh is now doing so well. Many of the interviews that I've had, many of the people that I've met who've been injured are still really, really struggling. Some have not made much progress at all. Others have made a lot of progress. But Ryleigh, like I said before, she looks great, near as I can tell. Obviously, it was a 2-minute little quick, if that, maybe a minute on the Zoom call, but she looks like she's doing very well. So talk to me a little bit about what that progress has looked like and what you've had to do to get her to this point.
Okay. Well, number one, we fast every day. We fast for 16 hours a day. So she eats for 8 hours a day. That's number one.
Okay.
Super important. We removed gluten from her food intake. We've removed non-GMO or GMOs from her diet, all GMOs, and it has to be organic.
Okay.
And so we also have her on several vitamins that there's at least 8 of them, I would say, that she was on prior to the IVIG. That is the latest treatment.
And the diet you said made a huge difference. Did that happen pretty quickly
Absolutely.
that you started noticing a big difference?
Within days, we
Okay.
noticed that she was, and it was diet and vitamins and fasting.
And what vitamin supplements, if you don't mind, because I know those who are listening who are struggling are very interested in what other injured people are using.
She's on several. Glutathione is one. Let's see. She's on a probiotic, a multivitamin, Thorn. I'm not sure. Quercetin, liquid EFA, homocysteine supreme, just to name a few. Liquid B complex.
Okay.
Gold, which is supposed to break down the spike protein.
And that's serapeptase, right? If you look on the back of the label.
Yes,
serapeptase.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct. I told you glutathione, vitamin D, iron.
Can I ask really quickly, which glutathione are you using? Because glutathione, I've heard hit and miss on different supplements out there for glutathione.
This one right here. Where's my camera? It's right there. Oh. It's the pure.
Oh, the
pure
liposomal.
encapsulation.
Okay.
So it's pure.
All right. And
let's see. Oh, I'm not done.
Okay.
Super EFA liquid.
Mm-hmm.
We have to do. It looks. I haven't tried this one yet. Chlorella. I haven't done this yet, so I don't know.
I've actually talked to a couple of people who've used the chlorella and had some good success with that too. So interesting. You'll have to let me know how that goes. So did you start?
That one.
Did you start the supplements at the same time as you started the diet and fasting?
Within a week, yes.
Within a week, okay. So it's a little hard to know exactly.
And I had done like. Oh, I'm sorry. 1 second. I had done over-the-counter vitamins, but these are specifically from a functional doctor.
Right. So probably a little.
Because he said I wasn't getting, everything I needed out of the store-bought stuff.
Right. Yeah. All right. Yeah. And you don't know this about me, I don't think, but my background is as a health food store owner. So I am very familiar with supplements. And so I'm always curious, what people are using. And I've had actually very good response from many people that I've talked to with glutathione, with the chlorella. The omega-3s I think are really big. Probiotics make a big difference because the gut seems to just get hammered with these things. So that's all really useful information for people listening, I believe. Okay, so then when did you actually start the diet changes, the gluten, the removal of the gluten and the GMOs, the fasting, all that stuff?
Our whole debacle started February 15th. April the 7th is when we removed gluten from her diet. It took us a good couple of days, probably a week or so from the 7th of April to get 100% because you have to throw out everything in your refrigerator and start over because you change your entire life around. So I spent probably $1,500 in food that week alone to replace everything I had. Wow. Because I went straight to a natural organic store. I mean, I was serious about getting my child back better. I was hard.
Yeah, well, and the only way you can approach this, in my view, anyway, and actually my last interview that I did, with a gentleman, Matthew Matlock, who is on the previous episode to this one. He said, "Yeah, you've got to be aggressive about recovering and go all in." So I believe that wholeheartedly, based on what I've seen. The people that I
And we did.
am talking to that are getting really good results are being very aggressive about it, and really taking matters into their own hands. And of course, you want to do things that are that you've researched, that you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
then once you have done the research, yeah, you gotta go all in. And I admire you for being willing to make those major adjustments. The dietary adjustments are difficult. Intermittent
Absolutely,
fasting
they
is
were.
challenging. Removing, genetically modified foods is a lot harder than people might think. You may have no idea how much of your kitchen is full of GMOs and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
fantastic. So then in that 2 months since you kind of finalized all those changes, what has the progress looked like? Has it been a pretty straight climb towards a recovery, or has it been pretty bumpy, or what's
Yes,
it look
it
like?
has. It has been an upward. She stabilized late, early May. She stabilized. The 5th of May was the last time she went to the hospital, and she went for pneumonia. That was her second time getting pneumonia. She went she went to the hospital again after that, but it was for chest pains and shortness of breath until we thought maybe it was something else with the chest going on, and thankfully it wasn't. So
Good.
the doctor says he believes it's musculoskeletal pain, nerves. He says part of demyelination.
Mm-hmm.
She still has some of that stuff going on, just not as intense.
What do you believe about her recovery? Do you believe that she'll make a full recovery?
I do, 100%.
That's awesome.
I also believe that God healed my daughter through prayer. I believe that there were so many people praying, and God put so many people in our lives that helped us heal her. I do believe that 100%. God had a hand in it. My husband never, ever grew weary, and he just prayed for our daughter all the time, continuously.
Excellent. Well, I admire your strength during this time. I have a 9-year-old is my youngest, and so we're right there, kind of in the same boat as far as ages go, or at least with one of our children anyway. And he's, thank goodness, healthy as a horse. He's doing great, and of course, he's not received the vaccines, but I can't even imagine being in your shoes. I've never been in that position. I can't imagine the helplessness that you probably felt early on, the frustration, confusion, and all the other things that went along. I keep doing these interviews. I've now interviewed and talked to well over 20 different people who've been injured by these vaccines. And unfortunately, the stories are just incredibly similar in terms of what people have been able to gain from medicine, whether or not doctors would actually even consider a diagnosis of a vaccine injury, all of those types of things. And then what most people end up with is a doctor who is more in the functional medicine realm, someone who already saw holes in the vaccine agenda and is willing to actually look past the medical dogma about this. And I guess that's what happened when you found your doctor in New York.
Yes.
Yeah.
He wrote on his diagnosis that it was because of this Pfizer vaccine or either the anesthesia.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's the story is compelling, but the best part about it is I was so excited to see Ryleigh look like such a healthy kid, when she popped on the camera, because unfortunately, I don't see much of that in these interviews. I see a lot of people in wheelchairs and a lot of people that are really, really struggling. So thank God, thank you for doing the work that you've had to do as a mother to get through this mess for Ryleigh. She appears to be doing incredibly well, which I hope for those of you listening, particularly those of you who are experiencing or have experienced an injury yourself, or you're experiencing it with a family member or a friend or loved one, I hope that you can find some hope in this and recognize that there is a path towards healing, because I
Yeah.
personally believe that our bodies are incredibly resilient machines. And if we take the things out that don't belong and we put back in the things that do, such as what we were talking about with the dietary changes, the supplementation, and that kind of thing, our bodies are quite adept at healing themselves. And it's such a relief to hear that Ryleigh is doing as well as she is. That's just wonderful, wonderful news.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm grateful for my functional doctor. Grateful.
Yeah. So then before I let you go, I'm just going to ask you, you decided to do this episode of the podcast, put this story out there, and yet your daughter is doing quite well, appears to be on the road to recovery. Why do you want to still share this message? What do you hope to gain out of people hearing your story?
I don't. I need them to think twice. I really want them to look at Ryleigh and think of their own kid and realize that this can happen to them. I didn't feel very rare when this happened to us, and I have watched my daughter completely change. I've watched her not be able to urinate without wetting herself and have to go through diapers for 2 months. I have watched just a lot of really awful things occur with my child, and I just want to get this message out to as many parents as I can. My goal would be for other parents with similar children's ages of mine, so that they didn't have to experience this, because it really breaks my heart to think of children that may present similarly to Ryleigh, but their parents didn't know how to navigate a health system. I'm fortunate in that sense because I do work for healthcare myself, so I knew how to navigate through them, and I think that's part of the reason I was successful. I also work in tech, so I think being able to navigate the internet was very helpful as well, and not every parent is able to do that as well. And so just get this out to as many people as possible, because it's very real and it's very scary.
Okay. Wonderful. All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to share your story. I believe every one of these stories needs to be heard, and we want to get the word out to as many people as we possibly can. So for you listening, I'll tell you what I always do at the end of every podcast. Don't be silent. Open your mouth. Share these stories. Share this podcast. Let's get the word out so that more parents can avoid the potential pitfalls that they could come into with these experimental vaccines. And let's live a healthier, more open, less censored life. Let's get that information out there so that people can have the informed consent that they need, and so that they can make better decisions for their health and their children's health. And for all of you who have been injured, there is hope. We can rebuild and strengthen and do the kind of work that Ryleigh has done with her parents' help. And it's such a joy. I have a hard time not smiling about it, because she just looked so good when I saw her, and it was so exciting. So thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate you very much. We're going to get this episode out right away, and hopefully your voice will get heard by the people that need to hear it.
I hope so. Thank you again for having me.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up this episode of the Dearly Discarded podcast. I know these episodes can be heavy. Some of them have been heavier than others. This one, I think, has quite a bit of lightness at the end because of the progress that Ryleigh's making, and I hope that that helps you feel more hope for all of these people who belong to the group of the Dearly Discarded. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Jared St. Clair, and this has been the Dearly Discarded podcast.